another 50,000 people, but apparently that wasn't good enough.
We're just focused on doing the most Melbourne show we can.
It doesn't really affect us.
Let's just push through it, right?
Melbourne.
But this Wade's no fan. But anyway, Wade, thanks for your thoughts.
Melbourne Radio Wars.
The storm is coming, but I'm prepared.
We'll win.
We will win.
I'll be gone for a while, but don't be scared.
Good morning. Good morning. You're allowed to say hello. How are you? Good. Welcome. There's still some people coming in, but we'll get started on our presentation. Thank you for the wonderful welcome, Katerina. My first time in Greece. I'm really enjoying being here, but it won't be my last time. I'll bring my family back next time with me. So thank you for the very warm welcome. And isn't Radio Days the best radio conference in the world? Yes? Definitely. I think this is my fourth time at Radio Days, and it always exceeds my expectations. There's always more that you can learn and see. Let me introduce the session today. It's called Melbourne Radio Wars, and it's based on our podcast. We have a podcast called Melbourne Radio Wars, and the three members of the podcast I am representing here today. We have Craig Bruce, who is a coach dealing with talent and content. Irene Hume is a consultant who works with music and programming. And I could introduce myself, but I think I'll let Kyle from the Kyle and Jackie O show introduce me.
Because someone gave me some audio of this ex-Nova flop called Wade. I think he was a behind the scenes, he was never a broadcaster. He was like one of these guys behind the scenes that think they know everything. Every radio network's got them. They're all cockheads.
Yeah.
Yeah. If it didn't translate from your language, well then it's not a very good thing that Kyle calls me. But I am also a consultant, and I mostly work in the creative and marketing spaces. And together, the three of us come together every week to talk about the Melbourne Radio Wars. So let me give you some background. Our podcast, according to an actual listener, rather than Kyle, because as you all know, we should listen to our audience and see what they tell us. They say it's like someone left the door open in a strategy meeting. And we try and help people understand what's happening on each of the radio shows in Melbourne and each of the stations so they can learn from it. And today's presentation is in two parts. The first part is about Melbourne, to give you some idea of what is happening in the Melbourne Radio Wars. And the second half are going to be lessons that you can learn, things you can take back to your station. And when we get to those slides, I'll leave them on the screen longer so you can take photos. That's totally fine. That's what we're here to do. So let's talk first about Melbourne. What is the market of Melbourne? Well, Melbourne is Australia's largest radio market and the city with the most Greek people outside of Greece. Yes. Hey, Yasso. Has anyone been to Melbourne before? Yeah. A few, yes. You would know. Very big Greek population in Melbourne. It is the largest market size, and to give you an idea of how big that is, it's around 4.8 million people that live in Melbourne. And Sydney, which gets all the attention because, yes, it's a beautiful looking city, but Melbourne's better. Sydney is only just a little bit smaller. But a lot of the big radio shows start in Sydney, and Melbourne was thought of the second market, but it's actually the biggest. And importantly for advertisers, Melbourne has more 25 to 54-year-old people, and so there's a lot more attention on Melbourne from an advertising revenue perspective. So who are the stations involved in the Melbourne Radio Wars? Well, we say it is a CHR battle, a contemporary hit radio battle, and all three stations are fighting for the same audience. Now, there's many more stations in Melbourne, but for the Melbourne Radio Wars podcast, we focus on these three because they are fighting over the same audience. So we have KISS 101.1, so Kyle and Jackie O. You would have seen Jackie here yesterday and on Sunday. They are on KISS in Melbourne. 101.9 The Fox is part of SCA, and then Nova 100, part of Nova Entertainment, where I used to work a long time ago. But they're all targeting people 25-54 with a slight female skew. So how did we get to the Melbourne Radio Wars? When did they start and why did they start? Well, this is why we started. Because in November 2023, Kyle and Jackie O signed a 10-year, $200 million Australian contract. Who here has ever had a 10-year contract? No. What will radio be like in 10 years? Who knows? But they have a 10-year contract, and it's worth $200 million Australian. Now, I'm sure you're not as familiar with Australian currency, so I've translated it for you. It's around about 100 million pounds, around 116 million euro, 110 million Swiss francs, 126 million US dollars, and just because it sounds like a really big number, in Mexican peso it's 2.5 billion. That's how much they earn. Now, if you're not sure what that translates on, they do about 40 to 42 weeks a year. They have about 10 weeks off throughout the year in their 10-year contract. So this is what Kyle and Jackie O earn per show. Yeah, I think that makes them the highest paid radio presenters in the world today. I'm not going to do an auction, but does anyone have an advance on that? Is anyone earning more money than that? No. They are the highest paid presenters in the world today, and they both get paid the same. Kyle and Jackie both get paid the same amount. Okay, so let's see how this Melbourne Radio War got started.
This is a special announcement. We've re-signed here at Kiss FM in a landmark deal that will see us both remain on air doing this show for 10 more years. Thank you, everyone. Not even your marriage, you never even thought would go 10 years.
It's the longest deal in Australian radio history and the biggest. $200 million. That's $10 million each per year for a decade, with a cheeky $14 million in shares thrown in for good measure.
What sort of person
Could take all that
rob a
money?
company of that sort of money?
And if that's not sweet enough, Kyle and Jackie O have also scored an out-of-this-world clause where they can broadcast from anywhere on Earth.
See you later, loser.
The landmark deal will also see them enter the Melbourne Brekkie radio market for the first time, which came as a shock to these guys, who found out late last night they're out of a job.
We don't want to say goodbye to Melbourne. We love this show. We love turning up every morning. We didn't have to be here this morning to make this announcement, but we're here.
Yeah.
But will Melbourne tune in?
And that is the question, will Melbourne tune in? So that was about a year ago. And when Kyle and Jackie O came to KISS, broadcast out of Sydney and into Melbourne, Jason Lauren got a call from their opposition. So they went to Nova. And they were recruited to Nova with a big celebration and big fanfare. And what that's meant is they've pretty much taken a lot of their audience from Nova, from KISS, over to Nova with them. So that's how we got here. This is where we started. Interesting to note, there's been a huge gap that gets overlooked in the timing. So when Jason Lauren started, Kyle and Jackie O started 7 weeks later, which meant that Jason Lauren could take their audience over with them because the marketing told them they had changed stations over that time, and Kyle and Jackie O were yet to commence on air. And that will prove to be an interesting point as we go through the presentation. So let's have a look at these shows so you can get familiar with who they are. Obviously, you know the Kyle and Jackie O show. You probably, they're world famous. A lot of people know them. It's sort of Hamish and Andy, and Kyle and Jackie O are the two most famous Australian radio shows that we've ever produced. We have Jason Lauren, who made way for Kyle and Jackie O and moved to Nova. But we also have Fifi, Fev and Nick, and they are in the lead of the Melbourne Radio Wars. They were the #1 breakfast show before Kyle and Jackie O started. So I'm going to play you some audio and some video now so you can just get a little bit familiar with each of the shows, and then we'll go and talk about what happened next. So first of all, I'm going to play you a little bit of Kyle and Jackie O. Now, a little bit of a content warning here. I saw the amazing Kyle and Jackie O video that Jackie played during her presentation. In Australia, we would call that a hype reel, a very nice version. Let's have a look at the real version.
Well, he is loud, he's brash, and he's trying to dominate the country's radio ratings with his unique broadcasting style. This morning, the Kyle and Jackie O show launched in Melbourne in their bid for global domination.
After months of build-up, Kyle Sandilands and Jackie Henderson's big day has arrived.
The day of the revolution, the beginning of the 20-year dream of going national.
Their Kiss FM show playing all their classic hyper-sexualised hits to a new Melbourne market.
You're a massive homo. Have you ever had sex with a paparazzi? You got a tiny penis?
Yes, I've got a very tiny penis.
Melburnians had thoughts.
Do you think they will go down well in Melbourne?
I I do.
Yeah, they're good. Yeah, Cole's funny. Yeah.
I don't listen to Kyle and Jackie O. I don't love what they do.
They kind of teeter on the edge of going too far.
They are super opinionated, very jarring. I don't think it's probably going to gel well with the Melbourne vibe.
I'm a fuel-guzzling, ex-F-boy, coke-sniffing asshole. That's what I am.
I won't listen to that.
Because we just don't need it.
Kyle and Jackie dominate Sydney radio with an audience of around 850,000 listeners and each earning roughly $10 million per year.
See you later, loser.
When he's not guzzling fuel or sniffing things, Kyle can court controversy. He's breached broadcasting standards and offended the country on several occasions. Fat shaming, labelling the Paralympics horrific, inadvertently pressuring a 14-year-old into revealing she'd been raped, and making offensive comments towards gay men.
The monkeypox, the big gay disease floating around. It's only the gays getting it.
Okay, so that's what it's like to listen to the Kyle and Jackie O show. Let's have a look now at Jason Lauren, and this is a piece they actually broadcast in Melbourne this morning, our time.
Yesterday, we're driving home from the Mornington Peninsula. We pull up at these traffic lights. Paul and I are chatting. I look left and I'm like, oh, that's Oscar Piastri in the car.
No.
In the car next to us.
At the lights?
At the red traffic lights.
What was he driving?
Not a McLaren. Imagine Jim Carrey in Dumb and Dumber when he winds the window down and sticks his head out.
You didn't.
Yeah, so I'm like...
You didn't.
Well, because I looked through the window. We made eye contact and I waved.
Oh,
and I was like... Yoo-hoo! I did a wave and Paul's
Are you
like...
sure it was him?
Yeah, because then I wound the window down and he just looked like, oh no, who's this nuffy? And then he wound the window down and I went, hi. I had your burger at Grilled. And he was like, cool. And I said, oh, and I know your mum. As soon as I waved and wound the window down, I was like this, what
am I doing?
Why am I doing this?
But then you regained by,
I had your burger at Grilled. Oh, kill me.
So, that's the Jason Lauren show. Very relatable. This is the Fifi, Fev and Nick show.
I'll tell you what, our social media guru, Aizen, sitting behind me, he's got some balls coming back in this week. There was a photo with our lovely producer, Darcy, who had her last day on Friday. She's about to pop. Too. You all took a team photo. I wasn't there, and so I was a bit flat. I was down the line in Perth. I'm like, I would have loved to have been a part of a team photo. There is a photo that I'm in, and the Photoshop job is such a brutal stitch-up. I'm on the end looking maybe 4'8".
This is a cute rave because that's not photo. We took that Thursday.
Shut up. The comments.
So many people were like, "Oh my God, why is Nick so small? He's a midget."
Didn't know
He's
Nick was 4
foot.
Clocks at Flinders. Stand up for yourself, Nick Cody. Adam, surely Nick's been edited down. It's called stand-up comedy. Nick, please stand up. I got one saying, "Hey Nick, loved your work in Lord of the Rings." It is brutal. I'm 5'10" and a half. Strapping lad. What's going on? What do you need?
Yeah, so it's actually it's not Photoshop. Anyone looking at the Fifi, anyone that's seen the Fifi, he is a small man. Other photos, he's always on his tippy toes when he gets photos taken because he tries to look taller. He's got small man syndrome. Fifi, he's 4'2" and he is a short ginger man. I'm a short ginger man. I'm a short ginger.
So, we have 3 very different shows, but all of them very high quality. Even Kyle and Jackie O's worst bits, they are still a very good breakfast show and still rate very well in Sydney. But let's have a look at the results from Melbourne. And Jason Lauren are the #1 show in Melbourne. So they have basically taken their audience from Kiss to Nova. And they have left Kyle and Jackie O with not much. But Kyle and Jackie O have had a lot of self-inflicted wounds over the last 12 months, and we're going to talk about those in a moment. But let's let you hear the moment when Jason Lauren found out that they went to #1.
Now, the latest radio ratings have dropped, and it seems for all their confidence, Kyle and Jackie O are still off the pace in Melbourne. The much-hyped Sydney duo only managed to place 5th in FM Breakfast. The hosts they replaced shot to #1. They're happy about it. Gracing us now is the king and queen of radio, is Jason Lauren.
Hi, guys.
Oh, guys, congratulations. How's the adrenaline?
Look, we got so excited this morning. We popped some champagne right at 9 o'clock, and then in true rock star fashion, I took myself off to bed at midday for a midday nap.
And I came home, it's my wife's birthday, and I said, guess what, babe? We've got to clean the house. The project are coming over. And you can imagine how that went down. So that was a reality check.
Well, you know, it's like a plot from a movie. How incredible has the comeback journey been?
It's been really overwhelming. Like, when Nova picked us up, and they've been fantastic, they reached out, and like Lauren can be a testament to. I was a mess at the end of last year, because you guys know what this industry's like. To get a team where you all get along so well and you're so proud of the product you're putting out, it is so rare in this industry. So for me, I was gutted. I just felt like we were just getting started.
Yeah, and I think we thought the fairy tale for us was getting a second chance and going to Nova. So today is just like a little cherry on top. And look, we were pretty graceful in defeat. We accepted the fact we'd been replaced by what we told was a much better product than us. And, you know, being told you're not good enough puts a little bit of fire in your belly sometimes. So today's been a really nice day for us to get to number one and to celebrate with the team.
And people have been fantastic. Like, we've been so overwhelmed. People come up the street and say, hey, we followed you guys over to Nova, and that is not lost on us.
You get up too early to be motivated by vengeance. Do you know what I mean? You just have to concentrate on doing the best show you can do for your listeners. But still, it must feel quite gratifying that Kyle and Jax are in 5th place.
We've always just run our own race, haven't we? That's our thing. I feel like everyone else is talking about this Melbourne Radio War and, oh, look what they're doing, look what you guys... We've just done our own thing. We're like, you guys go to war and make a big thing of it. We're just going to focus on what we're doing.
Yeah, we've tried to run our own race and stick in our own lane, and we, you know, we haven't been able to compete with some things. I think at one point some shows were giving away $200,000 at a time, and we were going and meeting people and giving them $50 for a handshake. But it seems to be paying off.
So, to the victor go the spoils. And let's have a look at the results. So this chart you can see here is the ratings. So we measure in cum first, which is amount of people that listen across a period of a week. And you can see that the red line is Jason Lauren and Nova, and the pink or purple line is Kyle and Jackie O and Kiss, and Fox have sort of stayed about the same. When you look at the breakfast audience, you can see that the Jason Lauren cum has followed them to Nova, and they gave them a 7-week head start to get there. The Fox cum is actually trending down, and the Kiss cum is sort of really down and out at the moment. The war hasn't been won, but the first battle definitely has. And then in terms of percentage share of breakfast, you can see what's happened there is Nova has gone from a 5 to an 11, all within the space of a year. So more than doubled their audience. So a fantastic effort from Jason Lauren and all the Nova team. Fox are down a little bit, and you can see that Kyle and Jackie O have a lot of work to do. Interestingly though, the narrative has changed. So when they started, they were predicting they would be number one by the end of the year, and that clearly hasn't happened. But you might have heard it through Jackie over the last couple of days in her time here. But also they're starting to talk a little bit more about being humble. Well, Jackie is. I don't think Kyle would ever talk about being humble. But they're talking about the fact that it's humbled them and perhaps they need to change their focus. And certainly they have changed the style and content of their show in 2025 compared to 2024. And we'll have a look at that in a moment. But at the end of the day, there's always a winner. And at the moment, Jason Lauren and Clint, who works on their show, are Melbourne's #1 breakfast show. So that's the scene, but what can you learn? What can you take back to your market to learn from the Melbourne Radio Wars? The very first thing you should think about is if you're removing any team or personalities, you do that at your peril. Now, the challenge here is knowing whether you've made the right decision, because you might have a view on the future potential of the show that you have, or your show, but the audience might have a different view. And the big challenge is, and this is what's happened to Kiss, is that they might not tell you how much they love them until they're gone. And I think anyone who would be from ARN or Kiss would say, we think we made the right decision. However, what they probably underestimated was how much loyal following Jason Lauren had and how easily they took them to Nova through some excellent work through Nova marketing and through the Nova content team. But really, it's a big decision to make. Sometimes we wrestle with these decisions as programmers and as people who run stations, or if you work in a show. Should we move this show on or should we keep it? And our number one lesson is you should really, really think about the decision to move them on. Really think about it. And if you still make the same decision, then you wear the consequence. But I think it's worth reflecting on the fact that the audience don't always know what they've missed until they don't have it anymore. So worth reflecting on. Number 2, and this is what Kyle and Jackie O tried to do, is they tried to let their marketing do the work for them. But marketing does not solve every problem you have. So this was the campaign that Kyle and Jackie O launched within Melbourne. It was called Make Up Your Own Mind. And the reason they did that was because strategically they thought that Melbourne don't yet have an opinion of Kyle and Jackie O, and if they do, it's probably a negative opinion. So you go, okay, that makes strategic sense. The creative Make Up Your Own Mind would have worked really well if when people tuned in, they didn't get the filth that Kyle was doing last year. And that's the story of 2024 for the Kyle and Jackie O show. Some of those pieces you heard are very mild. The level of sexual, explicit content last year was off the charts. It was too much. And so while the marketing's telling people to come in and make up your own mind, they did, and they decided they didn't like it. So you've got to be very careful about marketing doing all the heavy lifting for you, and you really need to have a clear job for that marketing to do. So if you're offering the proposition of come and sample, you better make sure the product is sample worthy. And last year, Kyle and Jackie O were not that. Number 3, you need to manage expectations internally and externally. Now, Kyle is a big, loud personality, and he was never not going to say, we will be number 1, but he put a time frame on it. And that meant the whole business and the media was focused on that time frame. He said, we will be number 1 by the end of the year. If he had just said, we will be number 1, someday. But he said by the end of the year. So what that set up as a narrative for our podcast and for the media was they failed, because they didn't meet that objective. But we know behind the scenes they weren't thinking it was going to be a year. They thought it would take longer, and they've since started publicly saying those sort of things. But you really need to get everyone aligned on that, because if Kyle really thought they would be number 1 by the end of the year, the show and the content they were doing were not going to get them there. And everyone was telling them that, and they kept going. Number 4. In a 3-way fight, someone will go hungry. If you're all fighting over the same piece of pie, then someone will go hungry. And at the moment, Kyle and Jackie O are going hungry. You have to consider how much you can kind of niche your content or own. And for example, on the podcast, we talked about the very real opportunity for Kyle and Jackie O focusing more on younger males. So in Sydney, they have a very more ethnically diverse population that listen to the Kyle and Jackie O show, and they have a lot of younger men. But coming into Melbourne, they focused on women, they focused on 25-54, but they could have built some incremental audience from aiming a little bit younger, just to start with, to see what they'd get. Because there were some other movements in the male-targeted stations in the market at the same time. But they sort of went too broad, and everyone was fighting over the same piece of pie, and at the end of the day, the victor got to eat more. And the last point I think is really important to remember is that friends who are funny still wins on radio. And we've talked a lot about, in our time here at Radio Days, about how to win at radio, how to do it really well. And you still cannot get away from that essential element of chemistry. And you could see that from the small piece I played you from Jace and Lauren and Clint. That was this morning's show in Australia. I could pull a quote from that or a grab from that every single day, because their show is friends who are funny. The way they describe it is heart with smart. That's their mantra. But if you think about it, they're just a bunch of friends having fun. They have good banter, good chemistry. They don't overperform it. They just are who they are. And the closer you have these people on air, the more success you'll have. So they're 5 thoughts to start with. But we thought we'd go a little bit further today and imagine yourself in a similar situation. You're in a market and maybe you've got a new competitor coming into the market from another location, or maybe you're a market leader and you want to hold on to your lead. We've got some options for you to think about in terms of your battle plans to win your radio war. So we're going to look at it in 3 different lenses. First, as a market leader. If you're a market leader, what can you do? B, if you're an existing show but you're moving to a new market, what can you do? And for C, if you're the same show but you're moving to a new station, like Jason Lauren. So let's start with A. Let's pretend you are a market leader. What are some things you need to think about with increased competition in your market? So Craig, on the podcast, says you need to aggressively defend and protect every element of the breakfast show and the brand that has made your station a market leader. The key is to know which battles you are prepared to fight for, because with a new competitor, you won't win everything. But you have to make a decision on what we're really going to fight for to retain market leadership. Irene says that a new competitor can be exciting, new and shining. It's important to continually evolve your show, keeping it fresh and surprising. And Fifi, Fev and Nick probably haven't done a lot of that. They've tried to do some things that have worked and they've tried other things that haven't worked. But really, you've got to try and keep the whole thing fresh and surprising so people don't go, I'm a little bored with this, I'll try and find a sample, because new competitors will probably be out marketing you and offering an alternative. So you really have to keep that balance. And I'm going to quote me here, using your existing audience to maintain the lead. You likely have a large social media following, which you can use to your advantage. Owned media channels will continually provide the best return on investment because you know these people are already further down the marketing funnel. So use your audience to your advantage. If you ask your audience to do something, if they're loyal fans, most of the time they will respond. But it's amazing to me as radio brands and radio shows, we don't ask our audience to do things for us. We ask them to phone in and contribute. But if we say, hey, we really need your help to do something, all the good shows know they can mobilise those troops and they can help them win the war. Okay, so let's say that you are an existing show, but you're moving to a new market, whether you're being broadcast into that market or you're moving the show completely to a new market. Here's some ideas. The biggest mistake Kyle and Jackie O have made is to show little or no respect to their new listener base. Once you've built a bond and level of trust with them, you can take them on a broader content journey. But in the first phase of a new market, the core listener is the primary focus. Kyle and Jackie O thought that what they did in Sydney would work in Melbourne because they didn't believe they were a Sydney show. They thought they were a national sounding show on air in Sydney. But anyone who's been to Melbourne and Sydney knows there are differences in the market, and there's always differences in the market. And what their competitors were able to do was talk to the market better than them. They just thought they would do the same show and it would work, and they've since had to make adjustments. Irene says everything you do should serve as an opportunity to reinforce the images you want to own and be famous for. Find ways of building a connection with the audience off the air too. One show I know of has a WhatsApp group with listeners to keep building the connections beyond the show hours, which is a great idea. And if you want to know what show that is, that's the Christian O'Connell Show in Melbourne. So again, let the community talk to each other. Be the place they come together, but let them interact with each other and talk about things that are happening on the show or in their lives. It could also be a great source for content sourcing. And for me, an existing show in a new market, find the most relatable thing you can attach yourself to and be part of it. A lot of content can be universal, but taking the side of a local listener is going to prove more beneficial than just assuming you know what they care about. Don't fake it, but find them something you can join them in. And Kyle loves a feud. He loves fighting with people. He fights with comedians, he fights with us on the podcast, he fights with people. If he only had to put that energy and attention into fighting for something on behalf of the people of Melbourne, he'd be in a much better place. He could find a local issue and go, the amount of energy and fight and things I can do, I'm going to put on that, and the audience would have been on his side. Instead, he focuses on manufactured phony media wars. Don't know why? That's him. And C, let's say you are the same show, but you're moving to a new station, or you have a show that's coming from a different station. Here are some plans for you. Craig says, if you inherit a show with an existing and engaged fan base, then it's successful for a reason. Understanding the relationship between the audience and the show is critical. You also need to make those new listeners who have followed the show comfortable and welcoming to the rest of the station, because they would be unfamiliar with everything else. They've followed the breakfast show or the morning show, but don't know everything else that goes on. Irene says your strategy becomes twofold. Looking after your show's P1s, the core listeners, which in this instance have come from another station, and your station's P1s, who now have a new show to get used to. Do whatever you can to help each group feel at home with clear and simple product messaging and strong contesting. We're big believers in contesting still. And from me, if you've got the same show, new station, the number 1, 2, and 3 jobs here are marketing, marketing, and marketing. Your strategy is clear and simple, that this team has a new home. Don't get too clever with the creative, and make sure the new address, the frequency usually, is the dominant message. The worst thing that could happen is that nobody knows that great show has moved to your station. Okay, so there's some battle plans, and now I'm going to give you 3 takeaways from the entirety of the Melbourne Radio Wars, and if we've got time for questions, I'll be happy to take those too. Number 1, don't give your competitor a break. Kyle and Jackie O and ARN would now really regret that 7-week gap because Nova had 7 weeks to say, you know that show that's just been pulled off air because it's being replaced by a show not from this market? Well, we've got it over here. And they had clean space for 7 weeks. If you have any opportunity to give your competitor a break, don't be surprised if they take it. So you really have to think about what you're doing every day and are there any ways you're letting a competitor succeed that are within your control and you can make decisions accordingly. Number 2, change course immediately if you're wrong. The big mistake that Kyle and Jackie O made last year was most people, including our podcast, knew they were doing too much explicit content. And we called it out very early. That didn't change for about 3 or 4 months. And that's a long time for a new show because the negative images that are built are really harder to move away from. So once there's a negative perception of a show, they only have to do a little amount to make that increase, that negative perception. The trouble is they took too long to change it. And the big question for now in the Melbourne Radio Wars is that irreparable? Will they be able to repair it this year because they have changed the content? Time will tell. And the third thing, and I think this is really a great credit to Jace and Lauren and all the team at Nova, hire the show that has the best motivation. Now, I'm not saying that Kyle and Jackie O aren't motivated. They like to win. They absolutely like to win. But they've just signed a 10-year deal worth 200 million Australian dollars. And Kyle himself says on the air, we're not going anywhere. They get the show they get. I'm not sure what motivation he's got to get up in the morning. Whereas Jason and Lauren, from the minute they were picked up at Nova, had the motivation to right the wrong. And they brought people along that journey, and they did a great job in briefing the media and from a public relations perspective in building those narratives. So Melbourne got on board with the team that were axed to make way for Kyle and Jackie O. But that show has the best motivation out of all the 3. They want to win, they want to do a great job. And we know that everyone in our industry has got immense talent, and Kyle and Jackie O are very talented. But I think the show that has the best motivation is the one that's going to end up winning. So there's some 3 takeaways for you. Our podcast is called Melbourne Radio Wars. I know there's some people here I've met over the last couple of days that are listeners. We do thank you for listening. And if you'd like to listen to our podcast, there's the QR code that comes there. And if we've got time, I'm more than happy to take any questions. Thank you. Any questions? Yes, there's one over here. I don't know if we've got mics or not, but I can repeat the question for you. Oh, hang on, there's a mic coming, I think. Yes.
Hi.
Hello.
I'm from Portugal.
Yes, hello.
A small market comparing to Melbourne. But I'm wondering, how often do you have your rates and how accurate are them? Because we can have that level of accuracy in our measurements of rates.
Yeah, our ratings come up 8 times a year. Yes, 8 times a year. So they're roughly about every 2 months, different times of year. But every eight weeks, there's 8 times a year, there's a new ratings measurement. But they do flow on. They're not like standalone measurements. They take a little bit of the last survey with the next survey.
Yes, we do also.
Yeah, just to even it out. Yeah, the next ratings are due out in about 2 weeks, I think. And we actually think Kyle and Jackie O will go up.
But in our case, we think that our rates are based mostly on perception.
Yes.
It's your method the same thing?
Yeah, so in Australia, there's a combination of the diary measurement, so recall, people's recall.
We don't have that.
Yeah, we have diary, and we also have electronic measurement blended together. Yeah. So, but your perception does count for a lot, particularly if you're a brand like Kyle and Jackie O, who, whether you love them or hate them, you have an opinion on them. So it's very tricky for them to do anything that could be negative, because those negatives will come through in the ratings. Jason and Lauren could do the worst show ever tomorrow and it wouldn't affect their ratings, because their perception is very good. Yeah. And they don't do worse shows very often, I should say. But there's more at stake for Kyle and Jackie O, definitely.
Thank you.
No problem.
Hi, Wade.
Hello.
I'm up over this side, sorry. Hello,
Right.
I'm back.
Yes.
If you had the chance to run one of the shows in Melbourne, which would you choose and why?
Oh, look, this will get back, okay? So I better... look, I would work with Kyle and Jackie O. Only because I think that there's the most to gain now. And look, we all have different views on this, but I think that they are a great show. There's no doubt they're a great show, and they work well in Sydney. And the big question is, why don't they work in Melbourne? But that show is done out of Sydney, and they've got a very Sydney mentality to the way they put that content together. I think with some, and you know, their ability to listen might be questionable. Jackie's a very good listener and takes input very well. Kyle, not so much. Is if they were willing to hear feedback and get involved, I would like to help them, only because I think there's more to gain there. Jason and Lauren don't need a lot of help. They're doing really well. Fifi, Fev and Nick are an older show. They've been together a lot longer. And, you know, whether they stay much longer, I'm not sure. But I think Kyle and Jackie O would be the one I'd find the most interesting as a challenge. But don't tell them I said that.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm from Croatia, over here.
Yes.
Just a question regarding Kyle and Jackie O. Here.
Sorry, I can't see anything.
Yeah,
There you are.
hello.
It's all bright.
Regarding Kyle and Jackie O content, how it's even allowed that kind of sexual content in the morning show of the radio?
Yeah.
How Australia handles the regulation?
Yeah,
Thank you.
This is where I feel like I'm the Australian ambassador, answering on behalf of our entire country's sense of humour. Look, I would say, and this is the analogy that I give, and I don't think Kyle would mind this because he is a Trump fan. When Trump says something now, you kind of go, oh, that's Trump. When Kyle says something now, you go, oh, that's Kyle. So he has had a long history of saying controversial things. He doesn't get away with everything. He has breached the Broadcasting Standards Code, and there are currently active complaints that are being investigated against that show. So they don't get away with everything, but they get away with a lot more because they've been doing it for so long. So it's kind of like the horse is bolted in lots of ways. And I'm not condoning Trump, not condoning Kyle in any form, but just to give you an analogy of everything they do now probably feels like, oh, of course they would do that.
Hi, hello.
Hello.
Upstairs in the middle.
Upstairs in the middle. Yeah. Thank you. That helps.
Let's pretend it's a radio.
Dark,
you don't have to see me. That's okay. It's Mike from SK Radio, Poland.
Hello.
I don't know the market, but I can assume that when you were saying about Sydney and Melbourne is better, there is a kind of fight between the cities, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. So maybe. Tell me, could that be a problem of Kyle and Jackie O that they're like, implemented from Sydney, that they are like enemies, boys and girls, like. This kind of stuff.
Yeah, Australian radio is very territorial. We still have local morning shows in all of our markets, pretty much, apart from Kyle and Jackie O. The trouble for Kyle and Jackie O is it was always going to be an uphill battle because they were the show from Sydney. But then they just poured a whole can of petrol on it and lit the fire, and it made it a lot worse. So they could have done things to endear themselves. They didn't have to pretend they love Melbourne. That's not their show. That's not who they are. But Jackie's very into fashion, and we've got lots of fashion in Melbourne and races, and there could have been things they could have attached themselves to be part of and integrate with, but they didn't choose that direction. Our suspicion is this year you'll see a lot more of them in Melbourne because that's what they should have done at the start. But yeah, the markets are quite different. A lot of people don't think that, but as someone who lives in Melbourne, I can tell you they're quite different. Yes.
Hi, Wade.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Up here, thank you.
Niall here from Beaton Ireland.
I know.
I understand you guys are focused very much on CHR, but I'm just wondering where Christian O'Connell and Gold sits in the kind of battle, because he's doing quite well as well.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, and I'll just give you a shout out too, because I was going to play the Underdogs clip that you played in your presentation yesterday, which is excellent. It's the best thing that Fifi, Fev and Nick have done last year. You look it up on YouTube or see Niall's presentation around Fifi, Fev and Nick's Underdogs. It was excellent. Christian O'Connell was on Gold, so he's on an older format station. He's up against Triple M, the rock station, and Smooth, which is kind of more of a adult contemporary sort of style. That's almost a separate podcast. If we could do two podcasts, we would be focused on that war. But Christian is doing very well because Christian is such a great, authentic broadcaster. He's doing things with his listeners. And this is a good contrast. And this is something, I'll tell you a little something out of school. I don't know how much time we've got. We don't have any time. Can I finish this answer? Okay. Because this is something they probably don't want me to tell you, so I'm going to tell you. ARN, the parent company that owned the shows of Kyle and Jackie O and Christian O'Connell, they like to say that it took Christian O'Connell about 18 months to become number one. And that was, it's going to take that long for Kyle and Jackie O. These are chalk and cheese examples. Christian came to the market and the very first thing he did was he embraced the market. Which football team should I support? You tell me. Where should we live? You tell me. Where are the best restaurants? You tell me. Kyle and Jackie O don't give a shit about Melbourne. And so the example that Christian has set for entering a new market is first class. And so any spin that we kind of hear that says, oh no, it's going to take them long. No, they're two different shows, two different propositions. And Christian is an authentic broadcaster who really, really has the motivation to go and do great radio every morning. So that's how I'd answer that. Sorry if I've taken too long. I'm happy to stick around and answer any questions, but thank you. Sorry, I wasn't even looking. Sorry. It's all right. Sorry, I didn't realise the time.